talk about Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks. Right now, the Seattle Seahawks are 9-7 on the season. And unfortunately for the Seattle Seahawks, they will miss the NFL playoffs for the second year in a row. And similar to what happened last season, they ran into the same problems on the field, but just with a different coaching staff. Before I get into Geno Smith and the entire roster, I want to talk about Mike Macdonald. I do believe that he's going to be a very good head coach moving forward. This defense took a turn for the better this season at the halfway point, especially by the trade deadline when they made the trade to bring in Ernest Jones. And they should re-sign this kid after this season. He was a solid linebacker for the Rams. They traded him to the Tennessee Titans. It was a weird fit with the Tennessee Titans. He comes over to the Seattle Seahawks, and he's their best interior linebacker. And this entire defense looked better. Now, their defense was inconsistent this season. A lot of the players are learning a brand new system. They moved off of Pete Carroll. Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, they were still used to the defensive play calls with Pete Carroll. And Ernest Jones, he came over to this team in the middle of the season. He did not get the full offseason to learn the playbook, to go out there and move around and train with the counterparts around him. So you give him a full offseason to get integrated in this system, he should be a better player next season. But you look at Coach Macdonald, on the fly, he was making a lot of defensive adjustments. The Russian defense looked better. In the last couple of games, the Russian defense has taken a hit, but they had some strong outings this season. They had a very good win over the San Francisco 49ers, 2 very good wins over the Arizona Cardinals, and they were in that game against the Minnesota Vikings until late in the game, until everything just went to hell with Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson. This defense played better compared to last season. And before I get into the offense, I want to talk about guys like Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams is a very good defensive player. 9 sacks on the season, 1 interception that went for a pick 6 against the New York Jets. Leonard Williams, he deserves to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation with how good he played this year, because he's just not your regular defensive end. He could play defensive tackle, defensive end. They move him around the defensive line, and he's easily their best run stopper. Uchenna Nwosu missed majority of this season dealing with an injury, but he's a solid rotational pass rusher to have, especially coming off the bench. And you look at Derek Hall. Derek Hall this season, as a rookie, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. And that is one thing this defense has been missing over the last few years. I understand a couple of years ago, you had Uchenna Nwosu and Darrell Taylor. They both had 9.5 sacks. But you traded Darrell Taylor to the Chicago Bears. He did not fit the system of Mike Macdonald. And he's over there with the Chicago Bears. He's giving them solid rotation snaps, and he's coming in doing the best that he can. But you have a rookie in Derek Hall. 8 sacks in his first year. I expect for him to be better next season. I look at Jarran Reed. Jarran Reed is a solid defensive end. 4.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. He can stop the run. Byron Murphy Jr. dealt with so many injuries this season. He was in and out of the lineup. When he was in the lineup, you saw the potential there. It's the reason why they selected him in the first round. He is similar to Leonard Williams. He can push the pocket, put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and he can go out there and he can stop the run. I like their defensive line. And this has been a huge problem over the last few years with Pete Carroll. The Russian defense has been terrible the last 4 to 5 years underneath Pete Carroll. And we saw for a stretch there, the Russian defense be better. They have a top passing defense in the NFL with Tariq Woolen, with Devin Witherspoon, 2 phenomenal cornerbacks. Tariq Woolen as a press man corner, he's one of the best in the league. And Devin Witherspoon is a madman. He can play all over the field. He's more so of the guy in the secondary. He's going to come up, make tackles in space, cover tight ends, and make running backs fumble, and have great plays against Kyler Murray and make him throw a pick 6 in that matchup. Kobe Bryant is a solid safety. He had a pick 6 against the Arizona Cardinals many weeks ago. And when you look at Julian Love, this man has been a consistent safety, even dating back to last season. When we go back and look at the Seahawks last season, they had Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. Quandre Diggs was not a good safety. Jamal Adams was terrible. Jamal Adams was one of the worst cover safeties in the NFL. And to see them move off both of those safeties and to let Julian Love go out there and get more playing time this season. And last season, he was a very good playmaking safety. He was their best cover safety last year. But you look at Julian Love, I like his game, and he fits this system to the T with Mike Macdonald. So their defense, it's a lot of things to like, but they still have to get better in certain positions. I think adding in another linebacker or 2 would definitely help out the system with Mike Macdonald. And I'm going to give him a lot of grace here. This is his first year with this Seahawks team. And a lot of defensive pieces that he hasn't went out there and drafted just yet. When I look at the work that he did with the Baltimore Ravens last season, it was phenomenal. And you look at those linebackers, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen. If Patrick Queen was not with the Steelers, this would be a perfect fit for him. but he is with the Steelers. So I expect for the Seattle Seahawks to go out there and re-sign Ernest Jones after this season and to possibly draft a linebacker in the second or third round to come in and help out this defense. But they're heading to the right direction defensively. They're not the Legion of Boom. That is what Pete Carroll was trying to recreate over the last few years, and it was never going to work. But the one thing that Mike McDonald can do long term is to build this defense through the front seven and let the secondary do their thing. They have very good pieces in that secondary. Even the depth pieces are very good. Now, I want to talk about the offense. The offense was inconsistent this season. Geno Smith this year, he didn't have a good year. And this is a contract year with Geno Smith. Geno Smith wants a contract extension. And I think the Seattle Seahawks, they will give him one. Geno Smith, 17 passing touchdowns and 15 interceptions. Those are not good numbers. But Geno Smith was not placed into the best situation here. And I know you look on paper, you'll say, yes, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker III, Zach Charbonnet. He's surrounded by weapons. And that is true. I'm not going to argue with you. But at the same time, this offensive line has been terrible. Remember earlier in the video when I said they ran into the same problems last season that they ran to this season? The general manager set this team up for failure with the offensive line problems. Geno Smith is the third most sacked quarterback in the NFL. Geno Smith has been sacked 48 times this season. That's ridiculous. You should not be sacked that many times in the NFL. And not only just that, you no longer have Shane Waldron as an offensive coordinator. You have a brand new offensive coordinator and Ryan Grubb. And it's his first time in the NFL calling offensive plays. He's the former offensive coordinator for Washington. That Washington team that went against Michigan in the national championship of last year's college season, he was the offensive coordinator. And he helped coach up Michael Penix Jr., Roma Dunze, and Jalen Polk. But that team rarely ran the football. They passed the football around a lot. And even though Geno Smith had a high turnover margin this season, he was fifth in passing yards for 4,097 passing yards. So that will get it done. But I would rather for Geno Smith to be 14 or 15th in passing yards and have less interceptions and more touchdowns. And that is the one thing that Shane Waldron did get right. It was more so of a balance, even though Shane Waldron last season was not a good offensive coordinator and he was terrible with the Chicago Bears. The balance was there. The balance wasn't there with Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. And when they did run the football, they got more results. And I do understand Ryan Grubb cannot go out there and run the football every single time on second and third down because they were behind the eight ball. They were behind the sticks. Majority of it is because the offensive line problems. Abraham Lucas missed majority of last season dealing with a knee injury. He missed majority of this season dealing with the same knee injury. Things got so bad last season, they went out there and they brought in Jason Peters. Jason Peters is not a starting tackle in the NFL anymore. And he is very old at this stage of his career. And no offense to him, he did the best that he could last year, but Geno Smith was running for his life. This team should have went out there and brought in some more offensive linemen through free agency. They did draft some offensive linemen on the interior, but it hasn't worked out just yet. And anytime you go out there and you draft offensive linemen, it's going to take time for them to go out there and fully develop. It's one of those positions in the NFL is very hard to learn. If you think quarterback takes time to develop in the league today, offensive linemen may take twice as much, especially at the tackle position, because most of the time you don't have any help. And you're going against defensive talent like Max Crosby, TJ Watt. You're going against Myles Garrett, Aiden Hutchinson. So it's hard for those tackles to go out there and get acclimated in the NFL system. And you may be dominant in college, but it's going to take some time. And we've seen this with some of the best tackles in the NFL today. Even Charles Cross had a strong rookie season. But you still saw some bad things on film. And he's been their only consistent offensive lineman in terms of staying on the field and playing very well. Abraham Lucas, when he's on the field, he's a solid tackle. The problem is he can't stay on the field. And the one thing that I do know from covering the NFL over the last couple of years, anytime an offensive lineman is dealing with a knee injury or he's dealing with a lower leg injury, they're never going to get better moving forward. They may play better, but the injuries aren't going to get better. So they need to bring in a guy that could possibly come in for a couple games when Abraham Lucas is down and fix the interior with the offensive line. Go into free agency, re-sign Geno Smith, re-sign Ernest Jones, and Geno Smith should not be making a lot of money. Geno Smith is not a top-end quarterback in the NFL. He's a very good quarterback, Last season, he had 20 passing touchdowns to 9 interceptions. The season before, he had 30 passing touchdowns to 11 interceptions. So Geno Smith can get you to the NFL playoffs, but he's not in the same conversation with Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. So he should not be getting paid $50 to $60 million per season. That's egregious. But I do believe that the Seattle Seahawks would come down to a dollar amount. A 2 to 3 year deal should definitely work out for both sides. And I don't believe that Sam Howell is going to be your guy long term. Sam Howell last season was in a similar situation with the Washington Commanders. Now, that Commanders team had a horrible coach at the time with Ron Rivera. You had Airbnb as the offensive coordinator. But Sam Howell, we saw this against the Green Bay Packers. He came in, he threw an interception. He led the league in interceptions and complete turnovers last season behind a bad offensive line. Geno Smith may be bad behind a bad offensive line, but Sam Howell, he's worse. And I will also say this, Geno Smith in the red zone, 10 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Those interceptions can't happen in the red zone. You guys know how I feel about that. You have to take care of the football. You could potentially walk away with 3 points or even better, a touchdown. So Geno Smith, he does deserve a lot of blame here. He's not blameless in this situation. But to see Ryan Grubb go out there and put him in passing situations on first and second down, which is terrible to see. You have to run the football more and play complementary football. And before the ones that want to come into the comment section and say the offensive line can't get a push, they actually could. Kenneth Walker III had a solid season before he was dealing with injuries. Zach Charbonnet had solid carries against the Green Bay Packers. They just did not go out there and run the football enough this season, and they were very inconsistent. They started out 3-0. This is a team that went out there, they won their first 3 games, and then right after that, they went on to a bit of a losing streak. They lost their next 3 games. They lost against the Detroit Lions in a shootout, 42-29. They lost against the New York Giants in the weirdest way possible. They were going for a field goal. The field goal got blocked, and they returned it. That is the game that I look at and say that is what cost the Seattle Seahawks a playoff spot this season. Because if they were able to go out there and win one more game, this weekend's game would have been for the playoff spot. Whoever wins the game, they win the division. And the Seattle Seahawks, they were sitting up top of this division just 4 weeks ago. That is how fast things have changed in the NFL. I do believe the Seattle Seahawks, they have very good talent, but they need to fix the offensive line, and Geno Smith has to be better. You'll rather go out there with your veteran quarterback instead of just trying to go out there and draft a quarterback in this year's draft class, because this year's draft class at the quarterback position, it's not friendly. You have Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward. Both of those guys may be off the board when the Seattle Seahawks are picking. And if both of those guys are off the board, I don't have another quarterback going into the first round. Unless the Seahawks want to take a flyer on a guy like Carson Beck or in the 3rd or 4th round, or a guy like Jalen Milroe. And to see Jalen Milroe at Alabama come over to the Seahawks, that's a nightmare. Stick with Geno Smith. Worry about the quarterback situation later. Be all in with Geno Smith in this team right now and see what you have. You've seen Geno Smith go out there and defeat the Arizona Cardinals not once but twice. You've seen Geno Smith finally go out there and exercise that demon and defeat the San Francisco 49ers with his leg. He had the game-winning touchdown. And this team was in a very close game against the Los Angeles Rams this season. 26-20. They lost in overtime. You get more offensive line help. Ryan Grubb gets another year underneath his belt. Hopefully he can be a better offensive coordinator moving forward. They can run the football more. But I like the Seattle Seahawks in the future. I say this every single season, but I like the Seahawks. I like the roster. It just comes down to, can those guys be consistent and can they show up? They made the playoffs a few years ago. It's no reason why they can't go out there and fix this offensive line this season. And the general manager has neglected this offensive line, even with Russell Wilson. Until they fix that position group with this team, nothing's going to change. You're going to always be 10-7, 9-8 at best. And that may not be good enough to get you into the NFL playoffs, which is crazy to think about, because the Seattle Seahawks may be 10-7 after this week's game against the Rams, and they'll miss the NFL playoffs. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you feel about this roster moving forward, and should they re-sign Geno Smith? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, we want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.